Of class, the teacher Marty notices that his students get distracted when they see a fire truck and police cars passing by outside. They explain that there was another earthquake in California and a big part of the area has disappeared into the ocean. Marty tries to check the news, but the internet isn't working. Later Marty is supposed to talk to all his students' parents, but everyone is distracted because the internet is still not working. Marty has physical copies of his students' files, yet it's not enough. The lack of internet is making everyone feel like the end is coming. When Marty leaves the school, he gets stuck in traffic because the lights aren't working either. During the drive, he sees a sign above the bank that thanks Chuck for 39 great years. Soon news from all over the world shows the same tragedy. The ocean is slowly swallowing coastal towns. There's also been many volcanic eruptions, forest fires, and tsunamis. In China, people are already rioting. Meanwhile, Marty's ex-wife Felicia works as a nurse at the hospital. For the last few weeks they've been losing lots of staff members to self-deletion, so watching her co-workers die one by one has taken a toll on her mental health. She takes a break in the restroom only to hear more bad news on the radio and the host thanking Chuck for 39 great years. When a colleague asks Felicia if marriage or divorce is easier, Felicia answers marriage because it's done in an hour, while divorce takes months. That night Felicia calls Marty and admits she's been thinking about him all day. She wonders if split couples are remarrying because people want something familiar in these hard times, and shares some examples of coworkers who quit to be with their families. Marty shares that he doesn't have many students left either and gets philosophical, talking about the cosmic calendar and humanity's place in the universe. Then Felicia mentions the Chuck ad she saw earlier and Marty admits he saw it too, so they wonder who is putting up ads during the end of the world. Neither of them knows who Chuck is. After the call ends, Marty tries to watch TV, but soon the signal goes down just like the internet. After a few seconds of nothing, Chuck's face appears and an announcer thanks him for 39 great years, only for the signal to go out again when the ad is over. The next morning Marty notices that his neighbor isn't using his car. The man explains that he had to walk 3 miles to work and back because a sinkhole has appeared on the road, cutting the city in half and swallowing lots of cars. There's a lot of traffic in the other streets, so most likely Marty won't make it to school until lunch. Then they discuss the latest news. California has 10% of land left, the Midwest is burning, and Florida is flooding. So all the food-producing regions in the country are gone. Europe is in a similar situation, and famine has already taken over Asia, where 1 million people are dead. The bubonic plague is back, and only a few bees are left, probably in South America. At that moment Marty sees a lot of neighbors coming home because they couldn't go to work. The sinkhole has swallowed their cars and even their workplaces. Marty talks to a friend of Felicia's who worked at the bank and asks her about the Chuck sign, but she doesn't know what it means either. Everyone walking around looks depressed and Marty's neighbor points out that they've been going through the stages of grief. When everything started, there were protests and riots. This was followed by lots of self-deletion. But now people have come to terms with it and will just wait for the end. The conversation is interrupted by a plane writing, "Thanks Chuck" in the sky. On her way to work, Felicia notices all the walls covered with dozens of graffiti dedicated to Chuck. She walks all the way to the hospital, only to discover there isn't a single employee left and no patients at all. However, all the monitors are still working and tracking exactly the same heart rate and perfect beeping coordination. The beds are empty, but it's as if all the monitors were connected to the same person. Sometime later Marty gets frustrated because the TV is still receiving no signal, and when he tries to call Felicia, he discovers phone lines aren't working anymore either. He decides to go looking for her and as he crosses town, he sees lots of abandoned cars and more Chuck ads. Sam's resting on a bench and Marty asks him if he knows who Chuck is, but Sam has no idea. In fact, he asked around too, but nobody had an answer. Since Sam is going in the same direction, he and Marty walk together for a while. They chat and get philosophical as they discuss how much time a person truly has in their lives. Eventually Sam's arthritis requires him to rest, so he stops at a bench to watch the sunset and Marty continues walking alone. In the evening Marty reaches Felicia's neighborhood. He comes across Iris, who recognizes Felicia's name and says she was always nice to the local kids, even giving them cookies. Iris is out there skating because she wants to have a good time before the end. Suddenly the power goes out in the whole area and Marty tells Iris to go home for safety. At that moment, glowing Chuck ads appear on the windows of every house, making it look like a ghost town. A worried Marty starts running and finally finds Felicia, so the couple reunites with a hug. He asks about the ad, but she has no idea how that appeared in her house too. Meanwhile, a 39-year-old Chuck is in bed looking really weak and sick. He's connected to a heart monitor, which shows the same rate that was shown at the hospital. His wife Ginny and son Brian are keeping him company and crying because they know he doesn't have much time left. Back to Marty and Felicia, they go to her backyard to admire the sky. With the power gone in the whole world, now the stars are brighter and easier to see. They hold hands as they identify the different constellations, only for a star to suddenly disappear. Then Mars disappears as well. One by one, the stars start disappearing in the sky. At the same time, Ginny and Brian say goodbye to Chuck as he dies and thank him for 39 great years. Marty tries to tell Felicia that he loves her, but everything goes black when the world ends. 9 months before the end of the world, Taylor works in a record store. However, she loves music so much that she likes setting up her drums on a busy corner and playing for the crowd. Sometimes she gets tips from the crowd, but they're rare. Meanwhile, Janice is going home in a bad mood because her boyfriend just broke up with her through text. She works at a bookstore, but lately she's been feeling like her life is going nowhere, especially since she used to be a very talented dancer as a kid. Chuck is in town too, attending a banking conference. He's a successful accountant for an important bank, has been faithful to Ginny since he met her in high school, and is proud of Brian for being a good student. However, he isn't happy with his life either because his job is very boring and he hates other accountants. When Taylor sees Chuck being all serious as he walks down the street, she starts playing an upbeat tune to lighten the mood. To her surprise, Chuck stops in front of her and after some hesitation, he starts dancing. Soon a crowd gathers around him, including Janice, who needs something upbeat in her life. She starts dancing too, so Chuck brings her to the middle of the circle and they start moving together to the rhythm of Taylor's music. Soon Chuck feels some pain in his head, but he blames it on his glasses and takes them off before he continues dancing. The crowd claps and cheers, enjoying the performance so much that they drop tons of tips in Taylor's hat. Afterward, the trio goes to a cafe and Taylor shares the money. Chuck looks a bit sick, but he swears he's fine. Taylor wants to know what made him stop to dance and Chuck says he doesn't know while his mind thinks about his old band. When it's time for Taylor to leave, she hugs everyone as she calls them buskers forever. Then Chuck and Janice go on a walk together. Janice shares the details of her breakup and Chuck assures her that she'll be fine. After they split, Chuck looks around the area and sees Iris skating. He also notices the empty corner and can't stop wondering why he stopped to dance. Later, when his illness makes his body so weak that he can't chew or walk, Chuck will remember his dance and conclude that's why God created the world. As a 7-year-old, Chuck lives with his grandparents because his parents died in a car crash. To make matters worse, his mother was pregnant when it happened. For a long time, the household is nothing but sadness. Albie deals with his grief by drinking and concentrating on his accounting job. Sarah loses interest in all her hobbies and most of the time she orders takeout instead of cooking. By the time Chuck turns 10, the household has regained a good mood, although Albie continues to drink. Sarah is cooking again and listens to music so she can dance in the process. She often makes Chuck dance with her, which explains where he's learned all those amazing moves. They also watch lots of movies together with a preference for those with dancing scenes. His grandparents' house quickly becomes Chuck's true home, but there's one exception: he isn't allowed to enter the cupola on the roof. Albie and Sarah say that the cupola is forbidden because the floor is unstable and there's nothing up there anyway. Chuck approaches the door in secret, but he isn't able to remove the lock. The night before Chuck's 11th birthday, Albie and Chuck are watching a documentary about Carl Sagan and the cosmic calendar. Since Albie is very drunk, Chuck brings up the topic of the cupola. Albie says that up there someone could see more than what they actually want, and that's why it's locked. He explains that this house is very old and has been remodeled many times, but the cupola has been there since the beginning. In all his time living here, Albie only visited the cupola a handful of times. He claims that in that room, he saw the ghosts of people before their deaths. Albie says that waiting for death is always the hardest part. When Sarah comes home, he sends Albie to get some groceries so the fresh air can sober him up. Then she tells Chuck not to believe Albie's stories because they're just drunk ramblings. Later, Chuck asks a neighbor about the dead people Albie mentioned and how he was involved in their lives. It seems the ghosts are the manifestation of Albie's guilt for not being able to help certain friends. At school, Chuck's favorite class is English. The teacher is too sweet to be taken seriously and the kids misbehave around her. One afternoon after class, Chuck asks her about a poem she read earlier, which has the line, "I am large, I contain multitudes." She explains that a person is made of everyone they know, everything they've seen, and everything they've experienced. Each person has a whole world in their minds and they get to choose what to fill it with. Chuck realizes that if someone dies, that world disappears. This confirms that the beginning of the story is a metaphor for the world in Chuck's mind, which ends when he dies. On his way out, Chuck sees Marty in another classroom. A few months later, Sarah dies while shopping for groceries. After the funeral, the house becomes sad again and Albie's alcoholism gets worse. Chuck goes to the grocery store and asks the cashier for details of what happened. The girl explains that Sarah just collapsed suddenly, so there's not much to tell. One night, Albie falls asleep on his desk and Chuck steals his keys to finally open the cupola. When he's about to step inside, Albie yells at him and drags Chuck away. Then Albie comes to the door to close it, but he sees something inside and immediately freezes in horror. With trembling hands, he forces himself to move and closes the door before he notices Chuck crying. He comforts his grandson, who asks him what he saw. However, Albie says he shouldn't know and hugs him while apologizing. Later at school, Chuck learns that there's a dance club and decides to join it in memory of Sarah. The teacher is happy to see another boy because the club is always mostly girls, and she trains them in a different music genre every day. Chuck is paired with Kat, an older girl who is also the best dancer in the class. He develops a crush on her and tries to impress her with the moves Sarah taught her, only to end up teaching everyone. Kat already has a boyfriend, but she still agrees to dance with Chuck at their school's fall fling. After the teacher gives him new shoes so he can be more comfortable dancing, Chuck considers it could be his career. However, Albie continues to train him in math so he can have a future, since artists don't make money. Albie also explains that math is in every corner of the universe, even in music itself because of how it counts notes and tempo. All his accounting files have people's entire lives in them in the form of numbers. Math is art that doesn't lie. On the night of the fall fling, Chuck refuses to dance with Kat and makes up an excuse about his leg hurting. His teacher overhears him and says that if he doesn't want to dance anymore then he doesn't have, but he should at least be honest with Kat. Chuck goes outside and looks at the stars for a while to calm down and put his thoughts together. Then he returns to the party and finally asks Kat to dance. They do their routine in the middle of the dance floor and everyone gathers around them to cheer. Their dance is perfect and at the end of it, Kat kisses Chuck's cheek, which annoys her boyfriend. 6 months before Chuck's death, he tells Ginny the truth about the scar on his hand. After the party, young Chuck goes to the football field and continues to dance under the stars. He loses himself in the feeling of freedom and happiness that dancing inspires in him, and this distraction causes him to accidentally hit his hand on the fence. Ginny doesn't understand why Chuck lied about it and he admits he doesn't get it either. 5 years later, Albie dies of a heart attack at home while a teen Chuck is away playing and dancing with his band. Mortician Sam surprises Chuck by revealing Albie has already paid for his funeral because he knew this day was coming, making Chuck wonder if that's what he saw in the cupola. Since Chuck inherits the house, he decides to continue living there instead of moving with his maternal grandparents. They end up joining him there until he leaves for college, since Albie also left money for his education. Later when Chuck marries Ginny they move to that house too. The funeral happens before his maternal grandparents arrive though, so Chuck has to be alone during that hard time. Later Sam sends him an envelope with all of Albie's personal effects, including the keys. Chuck finally enters the locked room and finds it empty with a perfect floor. When he looks out the window, he simply sees the town. Feeling disappointed, Chuck turns around to leave, but at that moment he has a vision of his old self dying in bed. This confirms Albie did see all those neighbors' deaths, but he also saw Sarah's and his own. This is why he thought the waiting was the hardest part. After the vision disappears, Chuck decides he'll continue to live his life to the fullest, refusing to surrender to depression like Albie did. He recites the poem his teacher taught him, reminding himself that he contains multitudes.